Happy Friday. Welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in the Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital asset space. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and joining me are my co-hosts, CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Capital Markets, Lawrence Luton, and Managing Director of International Content, Emily Parker. Good morning, Emily. Good morning, Lawrence.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Taking a step back today in the crypto markets, we'll take a look at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index currently trading at $63,693. Bitcoin retreating about 2% over the past 24 hours. And the CoinDesk Ether price ETX index at 4144, also taking a step back about 1.5%. And the new DFX, CoinDesk's DeFi index is at 625. DeFi is doing all right. They're advancing about 0.5%. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as a leader in crypto news, events, and data. So taking a look at the markets, the CME is taking over as the largest Bitcoin futures exchange as BITO pushes the limits. Lawrence, what's happening with the markets?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that so the CME has this 2,000 contract position limit. Each contract on the CME is 5 Bitcoins, so we're looking at 10,000 Bitcoin, which is $500 million, a little more than $500 million right now, 600 million actually. So that's in the front month for October, and BITO has it's like $1.2 billion in assets under management. And if you look at how they purchase their futures, right now, about half the futures that they buy are in the October month, and the other half are in the November month. November, they can buy a little bit more than they can for October. The CME is going to eventually raise those limits up to 4,000 contracts. But in the meantime, they're kind of maxed out on what they can buy for the October contracts, so they're going to start probably to buy some more for the November if money keeps coming in.
So
yeah,
a lot of underlying
and now we have other
activity.
Yeah,
a lot of underlying.
We're going to have a lot
there.
of. Exactly. So we're going to have some more ETFs coming in, and who knows if they'll hit their limits as well.
Yep. And in terms of mass adoption, speaking of which, Walmart is now hosting Bitcoin ATMs. Emily, that is an interesting development.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that people really know about. I mean, Walmart is the largest company in the world by revenue. And so one of our editors went and actually checked this out to make sure that it was real, actually bought Bitcoin. So you can basically buy Bitcoin with cash. There is some know your customer or KYC requirements, but it's a pretty interesting development. I mean, that a company like Walmart is using Bitcoin ATMs.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of which, Lawrence, you talked about ETFs. Well, fund manager Valkyrie is launching the second Bitcoin futures ETF in the United States, making its trading debut under the ticker BTFD on the NASDAQ this morning. Joining us now to discuss is Leah Wald, CEO of Valkyrie. Good morning, Leah. Great to have you on the show. So congratulations. This is a very incredible achievement. I wonder, going into the U.S. market, we have ProShares, Bitcoin, another Bitcoin futures ETF on the market. What differentiates you from the competition?
Sure. And Christine, thank you so much for having me. Everybody else, thank you. We're definitely excited. So thanks for having me on the show. I think it's a great question. And I'd say it maybe is summed up by my shirt today that you probably all know. I think that other asset managers are in the ETF business and we're embedded in the crypto markets. I mean, at the end of the day, investors can choose whether they want subject matter expertise and the ability to pivot as needed, or again, they can go with a monolith that cares more about launching their next fund than this beautiful asset class that we love and care about. I mean, subject matter expertise is very important. We have it, and I think that ProShares actually doesn't. I'd be surprised if they knew a miner from an oracle. So, again, I think crypto investors do care about, more than how you dress, and you'll never catch any of us wearing cufflinks, and we care about Bitcoin and always will.
I take offense to that, by the way. I have a cufflink.
Oh, I apologize.
How dare you? How dare you?
I would have a hard time with cufflinks, but they look very nice on you.
No cufflinks here, yeah. Leah, congratulations on this great achievement. So I have a couple questions, actually, just about all this controversy about Bitcoin spot versus Bitcoin futures. So first of all, as we know, regulators have been very nervous about a Bitcoin spot ETF, and they feel that a Bitcoin futures ETF is somewhat safer, even though the concerns are about the underlying price of Bitcoin and about volatility and market manipulation. Can you break down for our viewers why a Bitcoin futures is actually a safer investment?
Sure. And to note, we filed our spot Bitcoin ETF back in January 22nd. So, we do find that to be the holy grail and are excited when that time comes. To your greater point, the SEC absolutely has clearly signaled a preference for futures ETFs versus a spot fund. We think that this is likely due to, again, futures already being traded on the CME and being a regulated product. So it's easier to put an already regulated product into a regulated ETF wrapper, right, than it is to take right now an unregulated product and put it into a regulated wrapper. So, we're optimistic about how this transitions, but we are excited about this current product as well.
Right, but I guess the question is why is it a safer product? Like, why is it protect investors more than just buying a Bitcoin spot ETF?
I gotcha. Yeah, sure. So, the ETF is really meant for anyone who wants exposure to the potential upside of Bitcoin, and without having to worry about the risks, including trading on what, if they don't know if it's a regulated or unregulated platform, custodying the assets themselves, potentially losing wallet keys, or simply, again, just wanting to gain exposure to a rapidly growing asset class in their retirement funds. So that's easier with an ETF. I think that you have a breakdown here on CoinDesk. A lot of us are very comfortable with, custodying our own keys, but that's not the case for everybody. So I'd say security and ease and the ability, again, for this very comfortable vehicle that a lot of traditional asset managers have been comfortable with for a while to allocate to various 401ks, retirement accounts, IRAs, is really the big reason behind a ETF's importance.
So just back to the spot versus futures question, there definitely has been some criticism of futures ETFs in that investors could actually, over the long term, end up losing money. One of the reasons for this is contango, which I think I generally understand, which is the idea that these contracts expire and you could end up buying the later contract at a higher price, right? So I mean, given that it is relatively easy to buy Bitcoin on the spot market, like it's not like oil or something, you could actually go and buy Bitcoin relatively easily. How much of a concern is this loss to investors that could happen via the Bitcoin futures ETF?
Sure. I think that that's a good question too. I don't think it's too much of a concern, but obviously it's something we are very much looking into. A lot of investors are worried about those high roll costs. The question is how to address them. The way that we're addressing them is we do plan, to your point, of rolling into next month's futures contracts as efficiently as possible. And we do believe that actually our team's deep expertise in the markets gives us an edge over those other offerings. Could people buy Bitcoin directly? Absolutely. They absolutely could. Is there concerns around 40 Act Bitcoin futures wrapper? Absolutely. And I think that, again, this is our first step and first foray into an ETF product. And I think that there's going to be more to come, potentially spot next year. But I do think that this is a really good sterling product, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Leah, good to have you on. Cufflinks comment aside, but how much of the ETF is going into the actual futures versus let's say treasuries, and how are you dividing the purchases? Obviously, the October expiry is coming up real soon, so you're just going straight to November and so on, or how are you dividing it?
Yeah. So you're right. Our portfolio is specifically Bitcoin futures. With that, you're absolutely correct that does include treasuries, corporate bonds, and cash. But we're not investing in, let's say, the Canadian Bitcoin ETFs or GBTC, et cetera. So that allocation is, controlled by our brilliant CIO, Stephen McClurg, and everything is managed accordingly.
So, but do you have the percentage breakdown that would go into treasuries versus futures? How much is it going to really track the futures?
Sure. So there is always tracking error. That's correct in this type of product. As for the percentage breakdown, that's on the prospectus. And there are specific limits that must be met for a 40 Act product. So I hope that answers your question.
And is this also going to be cash created and redeemed, or is it asset delivered? Like what's the actual structure going to be? Because what we had with the Pro shares, there was basically cash created, and there might have been some aspects of that made at least some of the volume look a little bit higher on the CME the first couple of days going out. But do we know, is this going to be delivered? Are assets going to be delivered by the APs to receive the shares, or is it going to be just cash?
Sure. So we're the same, very similar structure to Pro shares, and utilizing just those CME futures for now.
Okay. You mentioned your T-shirt. It's the subreddit for Bitcoin. So you're deep into the Bitcoin community, but I wonder, does that mean you're staying away from ETFs and ETH or other altcoins?
For right now, we're very focused on our Bitcoin ETF suite. We have a couple others filed with the SEC at the moment as well. So we plan on really building up our ETF shop, and we have a lot more up our sleeve. All Bitcoin thematic for now.
Do you have a comment on, the status of crypto in the United States? Is it a little slow, or, going according to what you would perceive as a reasonable pace compared to the rest of the world?
In regards to crypto regulations, I assume. I think, is that your question, Christine?
Sure. Crypto adoption, crypto regulation, acceptance of the technology.
Sure. I think regarding adoption, I think it's going quite fast. I actually am very excited. I think that the adoption curve is going as well as we could expect for the fact that we're still early. It's still young. In regards to regulations, I think that regulators are very much trying to understand this asset class right now. And I think that the ETF is a great first step by the SEC. And I think that we will see more regulations in the future. And I think that a lot of them will be positive rather than negative for the crypto industry, especially if we think from a long-term view.
Yeah, just a larger markets question, but I think you'd be well placed to answer it because you actually understand the structure of ETFs. So since the first futures ETF was announced, we've seen the price skyrocketing, and the correlation is pretty clear. So I guess the question is, how much of this price rise is due to just like sentiment and narrative and people being like, okay, Bitcoin's here to stay, this is great, we're going to buy, and how much of it actually is linked to the actual futures ETF? Because obviously the futures ETF isn't buying Bitcoin itself, but there is some linkage between like futures buying and spot buying. I was wondering if you could just break down what you think is driving up the current price rise.
Yeah, we think that it's actually very healthy. And especially, right, we just hit all-time highs. We think that all signs are pointing higher. I think it's not just the capital flows within the ETF ecosystem, but I do truly think that a lot of the capital that was waiting on the side, the pools of wealth that were waiting to get in, are now starting to dip their toes with the ETF. I think that it's not just going to happen overnight, despite the meteoric, rise of BITO. I think that this is something that we need to watch for the next weeks and months and see how capital allocation from wealth managers, sovereign wealth funds, pensions, as we saw yesterday, and also from insurance starts to enter the market now that the vehicles that they're more comfortable with are now available to them.
Awesome. Leah, such a pleasure having you on. We've been texting back and forth long over the years over Bitcoin. So great to see you on the show, and congratulations on launching this Bitcoin Futures ETF. All right.
Thank you so much.
Valkyrie, Leah Wald. Coming up, checking in on Asia and a crypto markets update with crypto financial data firm Hyperlink. Time now for the daily forecast, an update on what's happening in the Asia crypto markets. Here's Angie Lau of Forecast News.
Welcome to the Daily Forecast, October 22nd, 2021. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief of Forecast News, covering all things blockchain. Well, Australia's long-awaited Senate report into fintech regulation has been finally published. It makes 12 recommendations, which aim to establish a clear framework for digital assets in the country. We're going to take a look at how the report could shape the future of crypto in Australia, and a whole lot more coming up. Let's get you up to speed from Asia to the world. First up, Australia's Senate Select Committee has delivered its third and final report on Australia as a financial and technology centre. The final phase took evidence from the industry, from academics and regulators, to consider the regulation of digital assets in the country and investigated the practice of debanking affecting those in the industry. And you heard those stories right here on Forecast. Well, our Forecast News' Lachlan Keller has been covering this story from the very beginning. He now has details on reaction to the recommendations the committee made from Melbourne, Australia.
Among the recommendations, establishment of a licensing regime for digital currency exchanges, a framework for characterising digital asset tokens, and ensuring capital gains tax applies only to transactions that result in a clearly definable capital gain or loss. One expert told Forecast News he's encouraged those recommendations aren't too prescriptive. However,
what I'm a little bit nervous about, though, is the sense of urgency around a licensing regime and a custody regime for crypto, when we know that there is no fit-for-purpose regime that we can see in the existing regulatory environment for crypto.
Miller says the reason the crypto industry has penetrated the Australian market so deeply is because the protection offered by current anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism finance regulation in Australia already creates a safe environment. However, he believes clarity and guidance around specific tokens and DAOs would be helpful. The report also called for a review into banking practices after industry participants highlighted issues with their relationships with major Australian banks. Miller says those banks need to play catch-up.
What we're seeing overseas is mass adoption. We're seeing every major bank offering crypto to their clients. So, you know, the Australian banking sector here, I think, is missing a trick.
Those banks playing catch-up could prove welcome news for players like former Bitcoin trader Alan Flynn, whose fight against debanking we have been following. For Forecast News, I'm Lachlan Keller in Melbourne, Australia.
Up next, ever walk by a Bitcoin ATM in Hong Kong? Well, if you haven't yet, chances are you're going to soon. There are already 134 Bitcoin ATMs in Hong Kong, with a whole lot more planned. So if you ever go to visit, you might just stumble into one. Stationed at some of the busiest places in the city, they offer a convenient portal to the world of cryptocurrencies. But is there more to it than accessibility? Forecast News' Danny Park reports.
A Bitcoin ATM is a physical kiosk that people can use to easily buy crypto with cash. After depositing cash into the machine, the buyer scans a QR code that shoots the crypto into their digital wallet. As most people have experience of using an ATM, a Bitcoin machine seems an easy way to start one's first crypto purchase. Angus Lowe of CoinUnited told Forecast News he's seeing a new pool of investors using them.
I'm quite surprised there's an age range from maybe 40 to even 60s. There's people within this age range, they actually come in and inquire about cryptocurrency and end up, they actually deposit and buy cryptocurrency. And I'm quite surprised there's quite a lot of open-minded people to accept new technology within this age group.
CoinUnited Director Joe Chan says people's curiosity over the Bitcoin ATMs will lead more to try to understand what blockchain really is. And to further that, the company has launched CoinUnited IO Academy to educate people on blockchain, crypto, and NFTs. For Forecast News, I'm Danny Park in Hong Kong.
And finally today, Ethereum has followed Bitcoin and hit an all-time high. The second largest cryptocurrency by market value briefly touched a new all-time high of $4,361 Thursday night Asia time. That according to data from CoinGecko. That's just a small increase over its previous all-time high of $4,356, which it hit back in May. However, it didn't stick. We saw a quick pullback with the price dropping 3.7% within an hour. And that's the daily forecast from our vantage point right here in Asia. For more, visit forecast.news. I'm Editor-in-Chief Angie Lau. Until the next time.
The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Let's have a live look at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XVX index right now taking a step back about 3% over the past 24 hours, trading at $63,373. And the CoinDesk Ether price ETX index is at 4117, also taking a step back about 2.1%. And the new DFX CoinDesk's DeFi index is trading at an advance of 0.5% at $625 over the past 24 hours. Joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Amar Gautam, CEO of Hyperlink, a crypto trading data platform. Hello there, Gautam. Amar.
Hi, Christine.
So Bitcoin is great to have you. So Bitcoin is taking a breather, a lot of profit taking happening. What do you make of these past few days of trades? It obviously hit its all-time high on Wednesday. Do you see that as sustained? Where do we go from here?
Obviously, I personally see that it's going up. I'm personally bullish on Bitcoin as well, but I think the price drove up primarily because of the ETF and the positive sentiment in the market. So BITO is doing really well. And the amazing part is now traditional investors will get exposure to the prices. So I see this as a forward step.
Amar, is the hype basically over though for at least the short term? Because we had this launch that happened earlier this week. We have a couple of other ETFs coming online, but prices have since come off, and it's not a steady beat of buyers coming in. So have we hit the top, the short term peak for now?
I wouldn't say that. I think we still have to see the launch for Leah's ETF as well from Valkyrie, and more ETFs coming, as you mentioned. We actually see increased trading volume for Bitcoin and also Ethereum on our platform. So in a very short term, I don't think we are going low, but I would see a sustained sideways movement going forward for some period of time.
So recently it's kind of been all Bitcoin all the time, but there are a lot of other coins out there on the market. Anything interesting like we should be looking out for? I mean, Sheepcoin, is taken off, Solana. I don't know, any coins that are kind of on your radar other than Bitcoin?
I personally can't comment on any of particular coins, but I can say this, that on our platform, we see altcoins being traded heavily. Whenever we see a sideways movement on Bitcoin, a lot of volume goes through the altcoins. Obviously, when events like ETF launch or something happens on the Bitcoin side, we see increased volume on Bitcoin trading, but altcoin has always been popular.
Mm-hmm. Well, taking a look at the DeFi market, it's now hitting over $100 billion. What do you see, what interests you in the DeFi market now? What potential opportunities?
There's a huge opportunity on DeFi, and particularly at Hyperlink, we are also looking into DeFi integration. But the regulatory landscape is not very clear yet, so we are taking a cautious step. I think it's really important that companies like Hyperlink get clear indication from regulators on how to shape the future for this industry.
So, when you say clear regulations, clear indicators, do you have any specifics in mind? What would you like to see done?
Not particularly at this point, but something to add is that I personally think that we all people in the industry should be invited to comment on and to advise the regulators at least. I know they're trying to study these asset classes right now. These are very new, but some involvement from startups and other innovators in the space should be welcome.
Amar, thanks for coming on to the show. Appreciate your insights. That was Hyperlink CEO Amar Gautam. Coming up, Lynn Albrecht, the mother of Ross Albrecht, with an update on the Free Ross movement, and checking in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day.
The new infrastructure deal, we thought it was going to just be about choo-choos and fixing roads. Turns out there's a whole thing about crypto in there.
They're hoping to raise $28 billion to help fund other aspects of the bill. And the expanded definitions seem to, be the main cause for concern amongst a lot of the folks in the industry.
For this new innovation that we not apply 90-year-old statutes, which is effectively what we have.
We've been talking about it for a number of days. This is a subject that very few members of the Senate know about.
I think there are a lot of others at the SEC who do understand the technology quite well.
Every time we take a step forward to regulatory clarity, what we see is market movement.
Welcome back. Time to check in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who is also the editor of the State of Crypto newsletter on CoinDesk.com. Good morning, Nick. So tell me what you're looking at the end of the week.
Good morning. Yeah, it's been a pretty eventful week, I think. I think the big question right now is where do we go in terms of the Bitcoin ETF process? So, obviously we now have 2 that are already live. A third is launching on Monday. And there's still quite a bit of a push to launch a spot market-based Bitcoin ETF. And even though that doesn't seem particularly likely right now, just given the statements from SEC Chair Gary Gensler, I think there's still going to be quite a bit of attention paid to that. So, I think the real question over the next couple of months is going to be, can these aspiring issuers convince Gensler that the investor protection concerns that he has are addressed and easily dealt with?
Nick, you've just spent a week in Washington. What was your sort of biggest high-level takeaways?
Yeah, no, it was a productive week. Everyone's kind of been talking about regulatory world intersecting with crypto. It's been happening for quite a while, but over the last couple of years, especially, it's really starting to accelerate, and I think we're starting to see a result of that now. And I spoke to folks both within congressional staffers and folks who are interacting but they're part of the industry, and everyone's kind of saying that there is even though it's still pretty early for a lot of what's happening, there is more attention being paid by actual lawmakers, not just the regulators, but the actual folks who are writing and passing these bills. So that's something to be keeping an eye on. And yeah, it remains to be seen how exactly that will develop, but it is a bit of a shift.
Is that attention from lawmakers positive attention or negative attention? I mean, is it something that people in the industry should start worrying about or continue worrying about, rather?
I don't know if worrying is the right way to look at it. The fact that there is more attention is probably good long term because it's an acknowledgement that crypto is a thing that has weight behind it. It's not just this passing fancy. It's not a rich billionaire's toy. As for how to address it, what I really heard is a lot of groups are trying to figure out ways to engage with lawmakers and do so effectively. And you have a couple different schools. You have those who they send letters, they try to arrange meetings with these lawmakers, they express their issues and concerns and suggest what they think might be an effective way to address these crypto issues. And then you have a different school that just kind of they tweet, they send flyers, they post angrily on whatever platform they feel like. And my understanding is that's not let's say that's not as effective as genuine engagement might be. So I think the question for the industry is how do they want to engage and how do they want to react to this fact.
All right, Nick, thanks for the update. Have a great weekend. That was CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Policy and Regulation, Nick Day. Don't forget to sign up for the State of Crypto newsletter on CoinDesk.com.
The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Ross Ulbricht was 26 years old when he created the Silk Road website, which used privacy and Bitcoin to spawn an underground marketplace used to sell drugs and other illicit services. He's now 38 and serving a double life sentence plus 40 years without parole. Our next guest is imploring the justice system to put America's geeks to work, don't cage them, in an article published on CoinDesk as part of Policy Week. Joining us now is Lynn Ulbricht, mother and advocate for the Free Ross movement. Hello there, Lynn. Good morning. So what is the status of Ross's case?
Sorry. It's a little, I just wanted to correct one thing you said. The Silk Road wasn't just selling drugs or illicit items, and you wouldn't know that from the prosecution or a lot of the media, but it sold many legal items as well. And so that wasn't permitted to be said at trial, but I just wanted to correct that. It was an open market.
What is the status of Ross's case and the Free Ross movement? And we heard that, Trump was even considering giving a pardon. So obviously that didn't happen. So what is the status of the Free Ross movement?
We're keep going and keep trying. We have a petition that is quickly reaching 500,000 people who say this sentence is wrong and needs to be corrected, commuted essentially, and working on a presidential commutation once again. That is basically this, we're putting the word out there and all the ways that we're trying to gain support. And we do have a lot of support, but we need a lot of help.
So, given what you just said, there were other things on this market, but obviously one of the most controversial parts were the drug element. And, sentencing for drug-related crimes in the United States, or what are considered to be disproportionately long sentences, this has long been a topic in the U.S. And, especially for people of color, this is something that has been talked about a lot, right? That people are getting disproportionately long sentences for drug-related crimes. Are you involved in this larger issue as well? This issue that's, affecting Americans kind of all kinds, or are you just mostly focusing on your son's case?
Every time I speak publicly, I bring up the outrageous and cruel and really evil system we have that is caging people for lifetimes, decades, lifetimes, huge sentences. And yes, you're right. It's often the majority is nonviolent drug offenses. The most commonly exchanged drug on Silk Road were small amounts of marijuana. There's people serving life right now for marijuana. And I believe it's something like over 65% are people of color. But it's outrageous across the board. And it's feeding this mass incarceration monster that is really harming families. It's really hurting communities. And it's not stopping drug use, as far as I can tell. And so I always talk about it. I talk about how the population of the prisons has metastasized 800% since the 80s. If it were a state, it would be larger than 11 actual states. It's huge. We're 5% of the world's population and have 25% of the world's prisoners in cages. So, yeah, I do. It's because I've seen it. I've talked to the people. I've seen it up close and personal.
Lynn, of the people you've talked to, at least 6 people have died using drugs that they bought on your son's platform. Have you talked to their families? What have you said to them?
Well, first of all, that was never proven. We hired a pathologist to go into the allegations. They weren't alleged at trial. The prosecution brought them up at sentencing. And I'm not saying they did or didn't. I'm just saying it didn't go through the process. I'd rather not go into my personal interactions with them, but I absolutely feel sorry for and grieve for anyone who's lost a child. And yes, I've had personal interactions.
Then obviously Ross was an incredibly intelligent person. But he must have been aware that there were drugs. I mean, you mentioned that they were selling all sorts of items on the marketplace and that it was a free marketplace for people to use. He must have been aware, though, of the drugs and the illicit activity. And so was there any idea or regret or, at the time that maybe I shouldn't be doing this? And if that's the case, should there be accountability?
Well, he does express regret. In fact, he did at the Bitcoin 2020 conference. It was broadcast in a speech, which I recommend you listen to. And he does express regret. He was 26 years old, on fire for free markets. The marketplace was based on the non-aggression principle and voluntary interaction. People could buy and sell what they chose as long as it didn't hurt a third party. That is, and the exchange of drugs happened, mostly marijuana, as I said. But that's a basic libertarian belief that people have those choices. Of course, it's a tragedy when someone, overdoses or abuses drugs.
Lynn, a free market idea isn't ordering hits, and that's what's been alleged of your son, that he tried to order the hits of 5 individuals. What kind of responsibility do you think that he has to the general public if he's ordering that kind of a action against individuals, ending their lives and wanting to do that to people? Do you feel that that was the right choice on his part?
Well, first of all, that's never been proven. It wasn't brought to trial. It wasn't ruled on by a jury. It's not part of his convictions. It's all based on anonymous chats. And so for you to say this as if it's fact or proven, it's just not, it hasn't been. And, Ross says he didn't do it. The alleged victim whose death the agents faked doesn't think he did it. He's come out publicly and said that he wants Ross out and wants to have him over for dinner. So I believe in trials. Call me old-fashioned. I believe in proving evidence, not that prosecutors and the media can come out and say these things and as if they're proven. They're not.
Lynn, why do you think his sentence was so harsh?
I've thought about that a lot. I think that it was because of Bitcoin, frankly. I think that it was a very threatening thing to powerful people and that he is a symbol of it. And I spoke to Tim Draper about this at the Bitcoin conference. And I said, why Ross? Why are they so down on him? Because the biggest drug seller on Silk Road is out. And he sold a lot of drugs. Ross is not alleged to have done that. And he got out after 7 years. And Tim said, it's because and he pointed to the whole conference. He said, it's because he's a symbol of all of this. And so I thought that was interesting. It makes sense. That's what I've always thought too.
What kind of choices do you think he should have made when running Silk Road? Do you think he should have run Silk Road at all? Are you proud of his work running Silk Road, or do you think he should have done something else with his talent and career?
Well, of course I do. I mean, of course I wish he hadn't done Silk Road. He didn't, if you read our website in depth, he didn't run it the whole time. There were many DPRs, the administrator. However, no, I think that was definitely a mistake. Ross thinks it was a mistake. He's paying with his life. He has a death in prison sentence for all nonviolent charges for something he did on a computer when he was 26. So, of course I wish he hadn't done it. I've lost my son. He's lost his life unless something changes. And his life, as I said in the op-ed, is being wasted, as are so many other lives. And I'd like to say that op-ed the angle was, of course, geeks. I had a particular angle, but what I feel like is hundreds of thousands of lives are being wasted as people are warehoused in the prisons. And this is, like I said, a new thing since the 80s. People were not being destroyed with cruel and excessive sentences, before that.
Lynn, we hear your message loud and clear. Thank you for coming on. And you can read the article on CoinDesk.com. That was Lynn Albrecht, mother and advocate for the Free Ross movement. She has written an op-ed on CoinDesk.com as part of CoinDesk's Policy Week, a forum for discussing how regulators are reckoning with crypto. All right, that's it for First Mover. Thank you, Emily Parker. Thank you, Lawrence Lewitton. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm your host, Christina Lee. I'll be back live at 3 p.m. with all about Bitcoin. Coming up at noon is The Hash. You're watching CoinDesk TV.